The scent of varnish and freshly sanded wood hung in the air of the small workshop, a stark contrast to the expensive perfume I wore that afternoon. I, Monica Freeman, a lawyer from one of the city's largest firms, was there amidst old tools and the melodic sound of a violin being tuned. I was searching for a special gift, something beyond corporate cliches, for a demanding music-loving client. That's how Benjamin Rossi, a luthier with calloused hands and an intense gaze, crossed my path. I remember the dim light filtering through the dusty window, illuminating the brown strands of hair falling across Benjamin's forehead as he worked. There was an almost sacred concentration in his movements, as if each instrument were an extension of his soul. He looked up when I approached, a shy smile curving his thin lips. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" His voice was hoarse, marked by hours of work and perhaps an inherent shyness. "Good afternoon," I replied, feeling a bit out of place in my high heels on the rustic wooden floor. "I'm looking for a gift, something related to music." He guided me through the workshop, a sanctuary of string instruments in various stages of construction and restoration. Each piece seemed to have a story to tell, and Benjamin presented them with an almost paternal affection. There was something genuine there, a palpable passion that immediately drew me in. It was so different from the world of spreadsheets and meetings I lived in. I ended up choosing a small ukulele of light wood, with a surprisingly sweet sound. As Benjamin carefully wrapped it, we talked about music, about the beauty of the imperfection of handcrafted instruments, about the soul each one carried. I felt an unexpected connection, a spark amidst the cold, calculated routine of my life. In subsequent meetings, which became more frequent under the pretext of looking for other gifts or simply talking about music, that spark transformed into something more intense. I discovered a sensitive, intelligent man with a peculiar humor that made me laugh at things I never imagined finding funny. He showed me a world beyond business dinners and obligatory social events, a world of art, passion, and simplicity. Our encounters were furtive, laden with a sweet anxiety. A quick coffee on a discreet corner, a nocturnal stroll through dimly lit streets, silent message exchanges during the day. Each stolen moment was precious, but also burdened by the weight of secrecy. I knew my family would never understand. To them, a man like Benjamin, without the proper status, without an influential last name, would be an aberration, a blemish on my carefully planned future. I can still feel the butterflies from the first time I brought him to my apartment, knowing that every step was an immense risk. The contrast between my home's modern, impersonal decor and his warm, unpretentious presence was almost palpable. We talked for hours, drinking cheap wine and listening to old records. That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt I could be myself, without the masks and expectations that always accompanied me. The touch of his hands was different from anything I had ever experienced. There was an honesty there, a gentleness that disarmed me. His kisses were calm, yet charged with an intensity that made me completely forget the outside world and all the barriers that separated us. In those moments, we were just Monica and Benjamin, two souls finding refuge in each other. But the shadow of my family reality constantly loomed over us, like a dark cloud in a blue sky. I knew our secret couldn't last forever, and the fear of my parents' reaction, the disappointment in their eyes, and the sharp words that would surely come, was a constant ghost in my thoughts. How could I tell them about Benjamin? How could I explain that I found more happiness in his arms than in all the social events and professional achievements they valued so much? The answer seemed distant, almost impossible to reach. And with each passing day, the weight of this silent choice became harder to bear. Family dinners were always formal events, filled with expensive wine and conversations about business and politics. My father, a man of few words and firm opinions, always emphasized the importance of good connections and a promising future for me. My mother, with her impeccable elegance and a gaze that seemed to scrutinize my every move, completed the picture of unshakable expectations. In those moments, sitting at the richly decorated dinner table, I felt a lump in my throat. Every compliment on my career, every mention of a potential good match from our social circle, was like a silent stab at my secret. I smiled, nodded, and tried to appear like the obedient, successful daughter they expected. But inside, Benjamin's name echoed like a forbidden melody. I remember one dinner in particular, when Mr. Dawson, an old family friend and one of the firm's major partners, asked me about my relationships. His question, posed with an insinuating smile and a look of approval at my parents, chilled me. "So, Monica, has any promising young man caught your eye?" he asked, as he brought a forkful of risotto to his lips. I felt my parents' inquisitive gaze on me. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "I'm focused on my career, Mr. Dawson. Work has been quite absorbing." My mother shot a meaningful look at my father, a glint of approval in her eyes. "That's right, she's very dedicated. But we also know an intelligent woman like Monica needs a good companion by her side." The conversation continued down this winding path, with mentions of friends' children, successful young businessmen, and heirs to great fortunes. With each suggestion, my heart tightened further. How would they react if they knew my heart already belonged to someone else, a man who built his life with his own hands and valued the beauty of simplicity above any social status? In contrast to the rigidity of these dinners, moments with Benjamin were a breath of fresh air. Our conversations flowed naturally, without the need to measure every word or maintain an impeccable posture. He was genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings, in the Monica behind the successful lawyer. I remember a rainy afternoon in his workshop. The sound of rain hitting the tin roof created a cozy, intimate atmosphere. Benjamin was working on restoring an old cello, and I watched him, fascinated by the delicacy of his movements. "You have the hands of an artist," I commented, admiring the precision with which he handled the tools. He smiled, his cheeks slightly flushed. "And you have a sharp mind, Monica. I admire your intelligence." At that moment, I felt a deep connection, a mutual acceptance that transcended our differences in origin and lifestyle. He saw me for who I was, and I saw him the same way. It was this authenticity that bound me to him, this feeling of being truly understood. But reality always came back to haunt me. I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. The pressure from my family gradually increased, with more direct questions and insistent suggestions about my romantic future. My friends from work and my social circle also began to notice my more reserved behavior and my frequent excuses to avoid social events. The thought of introducing Benjamin to my parents sent shivers down my spine. I imagined the scene: my mother's disapproving gaze, my father's incisive questions, perhaps even derogatory comments about his profession and background. The fear of rejection was paralyzing. At the same time, the guilt of hiding Benjamin also gnawed at me. He deserved to be acknowledged. He deserved to be part of my life without having to hide. Our relationship, built on sincerity and passion, was being suffocated by the weight of my secret. In one of our most serious conversations, Benjamin sensed my anguish. We were sitting on a wooden bench in the square, watching people move around us. The afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows over us. "You seem distant lately, Monica. Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice laden with concern. I hesitated for a moment, fighting back tears that threatened to fall. "It's my family, Benjamin. They have a lot of expectations." He held my hand, his rough fingers contrasting with the softness of my skin. "You don't have to live up to anyone's expectations, Monica. Your happiness is what matters." His words were comforting, but the reality of my family situation seemed insurmountable. I loved Benjamin deeply, but the fear of losing my family, of disappointing them, was almost as strong as that love. I was caught at a crossroads, and the silent choice I had made to love Benjamin in secret was starting to exact too high a price. The pressure to reveal the truth became increasingly unbearable. The decision to tell my parents about Benjamin hung over me like an impending threat. Every phone call, every invitation to a social event, every conversation about my future was a constant reminder of the chasm opening between the life they expected for me and the reality of my heart. On a cold autumn evening, after an especially tense dinner with my parents where the topic of finding a good match was insistently debated, I arrived home exhausted. Benjamin was waiting for me, the warm light of the lamp creating a welcoming contrast to the coldness I brought from the street. "How was it?" he asked, his dark eyes searching mine. I sat on the sofa, feeling the weight of the day collapse on me. "The same as always." They seemed to live in another century, in another world. Benjamin came closer and held my hands. "You don't have to fit into their world, Monica. You have your own world, our world." His words were a balm, but insecurity still gnawed at me. What if our world isn't enough for them? What if they force me to choose? A heavy silence settled between us. I knew this conversation was inevitable, that we needed to face the reality of our situation. "Do you want me to leave?" Benjamin asked, his voice low and tinged with a sadness that broke my heart. "No," I replied immediately, squeezing his hands tightly. "I can't imagine my life without you." That night, we made a silent decision, a mutual promise to face whatever came, together. We knew the path would be difficult, but the love that united us seemed strong enough to overcome any obstacle. The first step was to find the right moment to talk to my parents. I postponed the conversation for weeks, making excuses and avoiding one-on-one meetings with them. But the internal pressure became unbearable. I needed to be honest. I needed to give Benjamin the recognition he deserved. I chose a Sunday afternoon, a day when my parents were usually more relaxed. I invited them for tea at my apartment, trying to keep a casual tone so as not to raise suspicion. When they arrived, the usual formality of their gestures and words created a tense atmosphere in my home. I sat between them on the sofa, feeling my heart pound. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," I began, my voice trembling slightly. Their gaze immediately turned serious, filled with cautious expectation. "About what, dear?" my mother asked, her voice soft but with a hint of warning. I took a deep breath and gathered all the courage I could find. "I'm dating. For a while now, actually." Silence fell in the room. My father's gaze became inscrutable, while my mother frowned, showing worried curiosity. "And who is he, Monica?" my father asked, his voice firm and direct. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of my next words. "His name is Benjamin Rossi. He's a luthier." The reaction was immediate and exactly as I feared. My mother's expression hardened, and my father let out a dry laugh, filled with disbelief. "A luthier? What is that, Monica? Some kind of artisan?" There was a tone of disdain in his voice that hit me like a slap. "He builds and restores musical instruments, Dad. It's honest work, and he's very talented." I tried to remain calm, but indignation began to bubble within me. "Honest? Monica, you're a successful lawyer, with a brilliant future. You should be dating someone on your level, someone who can offer you security and status." My father's voice rose, filled with frustration and disapproval. My mother, with an expression of deep disappointment, interjected. "Darling, we only want what's best for you. You worked hard to get where you are. We just can't understand this choice of yours." "This is my choice, Mom," I replied, my voice now firmer. "I love him. He makes me happy in a way no one else has." The discussion that followed was painful and exhausting. They questioned Benjamin's profession, his family background, his plans for the future. Each question was loaded with silent judgment, a profound misunderstanding of what I truly valued. I felt torn between the need to defend the man I loved and the desire not to hurt my parents. But deep down, I knew I couldn't give in. The happiness I had found with Benjamin was too real and precious to be sacrificed for my parents' social expectations. That afternoon, the silent choice I had made to love Benjamin in secret finally found its voice. And although my parents' words had hurt, I also felt a certain relief at having, finally, brought the truth to light. The road ahead would be uncertain, but I knew I was no longer alone. Benjamin was by my side, and together, we would face the consequences of my choice. The weeks that followed my conversation with my parents were charged with palpable tension. Phone calls became less frequent and more formal, and invitations to family dinners ceased completely. It was as if I had become a stranger to them, someone who had taken an unacceptable path and, therefore, should be kept at a distance. Their coldness was painful, but not entirely surprising. I had always known their expectations were rigid, that their world was governed by social rules and hierarchies that Benjamin simply didn't fit into. Nevertheless, the intensity of their rejection still hit me hard, leaving a void where the family affection I had always received used to be. Benjamin was my safe harbor during this turbulent period. He listened patiently, without trying to minimize the pain of rejection, but also constantly reminding me of the value of our love and the importance of following our own path. "They're afraid, Monica," he said one evening as we had dinner in his small apartment above the workshop. The candlelight created an intimate and cozy atmosphere. "Afraid you won't be happy their way, afraid of what others will think." His words brought some comfort. Perhaps my parents' reaction wasn't purely malice, but rather a manifestation of their own insecurities and their limited view of what a successful life entailed. Despite the distance imposed by my family, my relationship with Benjamin flourished. Without the need for secrets, we could live our love more openly and intensely. We spent more time together, exploring our worlds, discovering new affinities, and strengthening the bonds that united us. Visiting Benjamin's workshop became one of my favorite refuges. The smell of wood, the sound of instruments being tuned, the passion emanating from each piece created by his hands, everything there reminded me of the beauty of authenticity and the importance of following one's own calling. Sometimes, I would watch him work for hours, fascinated by his concentration and how his hands transformed raw pieces of wood into works of art. He also started to feel more at ease in my apartment, leaving small personal items, a poetry book, a tool from his workshop, as marks of his presence. It was as if, silently, he was building a home with us there, a space where our two worlds met. I met some of his friends, simple and genuine people who shared his passion for music and art. In their conversations, I felt a freedom I rarely experienced in my own social circle, where appearances and status often spoke louder than people's true essence. However, the absence of my family was still an open wound. I missed conversations with my mother, even if they were sometimes tense. I missed my father's protective silence, even if his approvals were rare. There was an emptiness on holidays, at Sunday lunches, in the small family rituals that were once part of my life. Some friends from my social circle tried to get closer, curious about the scandal of my new relationship. Their inquisitive glances and discreet questions constantly reminded me of the silent judgment I faced. I preferred to distance myself from these gatherings, seeking the company of Benjamin and his friends, where I felt accepted for who I was, not for my last name or my profession. The pressure to give in and reconcile with my parents began to subtly increase. Some more distant relatives made well-intentioned comments, suggesting I should think about the future and not hurt my parents. It was as if my love for Benjamin was a youthful stubbornness, something fleeting that should be overcome in the name of sensibility. But with each passing day alongside Benjamin, my love for him grew stronger. I saw the beauty in his passion, the honesty in his work, the kindness in his heart. He offered me a genuine, selfless, and profound love, something I had never found in my own world of appearances. The silent choice I had made to love Benjamin was becoming increasingly loud within me. It was a constant affirmation of my autonomy, my ability to define my own happiness, regardless of others' expectations. And although the pain of family rejection still hurt, the certainty that I was living an authentic and true life gave me the strength to move forward. In Benjamin's arms, I found not only love but also the freedom to be who I truly was. Months turned into almost a year since the truth about Benjamin came out to my parents. The distance between us remained almost unchanged, a silence laden with disapproval that hung over any attempt at contact. I had learned to live with this absence, to find comfort and support in Benjamin's love and the company of his friends. Our relationship deepened every day. We shared dreams, fears, and plans for the future. We talked about the possibility of living together, of building a home where Benjamin's art and passion would align with my practicality and organization. It was a simple future, perhaps without the glitter and status my parents valued so much, but filled with genuine love and a happiness I had never experienced before. Benjamin continued to thrive in his workshop. His talent as a luthier was increasingly recognized, and his creations began to attract the attention of renowned musicians. I felt incredibly proud of his accomplishments, of how he dedicated his life to his passion, regardless of social recognition or the accumulation of material possessions. I also continued my career at the law firm, but my perspective had shifted. The ambitions that once drove me seemed less important now. Professional success was still relevant, but it was no longer the center of my life. The balance between work and my personal life, the happiness I found alongside Benjamin, had become my priorities. One sunny weekend, Benjamin took me to meet his parents. They lived in a small town in the countryside, in a simple house surrounded by a flowering garden. I was welcomed with a warmth and acceptance that contrasted sharply with the coldness of my own family. His parents were humble and welcoming people who valued honesty, hard work, and love above any social status. That day, I felt as if I had found a new family, a place where I was accepted for who I was, without judgment or expectations. That encounter gave me even more certainty in my choice. I had found a true love, built on solid foundations of respect, admiration, and affection. The absence of my family hurt, but it couldn't overshadow the happiness I experienced alongside Benjamin. However, fate sometimes holds surprises for us. One day, I received a phone call from an aunt, my mother's sister. Her voice was choked with emotion. My mother had been in a serious accident. The world seemed to stop for an instant. The coldness and distance of the past few months dissipated, giving way to a wave of worry and anguish. Regardless of our differences, she was my mother, the woman who gave me life. I rushed to the hospital, with Benjamin by my side, offering silent support. The scene I found there was desolate. My father was pale and dejected, and the air in the waiting room was filled with apprehension. I waited for hours, reliving moments from my childhood in my mind, memories of times when we were a united family. The anger and frustration of the past few months seemed insignificant in the face of life's fragility. When I finally saw my mother, she was pale and weak, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. In that moment, all the barriers that separated us seemed to have disappeared. There was only the unconditional love of a mother and a daughter. In the days that followed, I spent most of my time at the hospital, taking care of her, talking with my father, trying to rebuild the bridge that had been broken. Benjamin was always by my side, offering practical and emotional support. His gentle and discreet presence even seemed to soften my father's rigidity a little. During this delicate period, I realized the fragility of family ties and the importance of letting go of pride and expectations in the name of love and mutual support. My mother's accident had created an unexpected opportunity for reconciliation, for the rebuilding of a relationship I feared I had lost forever. We still didn't know what the future would hold, but in that moment, in the silence of the hospital room, as I held my mother's hand, I felt a tenuous hope that perhaps, just perhaps, my silent choice to love Benjamin could, one day, be understood and even accepted by those I loved so much. The journey would be long, but the first step toward rapprochement had been taken. The days in the hospital dragged on, marked by the fragility of life and the slowness of my mother's recovery. However, in that environment of apprehension and care, something unexpected began to blossom, a silent rapprochement between me and my parents. My father, once so reserved and critical of Benjamin, started to accept his presence by my side. Perhaps the vulnerability of the moment, the need for mutual support, broke down some of his rigidity. He allowed Benjamin to accompany me on visits and even exchanged a few words with him about trivial matters, like traffic or the day's news. It was a timid but significant start. My mother, in her moments of lucidity, showed an even more surprising acceptance. She looked at Benjamin with a softer gaze, and on one occasion, as he helped me adjust her pillows, she whispered an almost inaudible "thank you." It was a small gesture, but loaded with immense meaning. I realized that Benjamin's genuine love and concern for me were undeniable, and perhaps my parents, amidst their own fragility and fear, were finally starting to see it. Social status, profession, last name, all that had once seemed so important, lost their meaning in the face of the loyalty and affection he offered me. As my mother's health gradually improved, the tension at home also decreased. Family dinners resumed, albeit with a lighter, more cautious atmosphere. Benjamin was not yet formally invited, but my mother, in a phone call, casually mentioned that, if he wanted to drop by for coffee after work, he would be welcome. It was a shy invitation, but a huge step towards acceptance. The first time Benjamin joined us for coffee was awkward and a little tense. Silence hung in the room, broken only by the clinking of cups. But gradually, conversation flowed, driven by my mother's curious questions about Benjamin's work and his gentle, passionate answers about his art. My father remained more reserved but made no disparaging comments. That night, I felt a glimmer of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. Perhaps love could, in fact, overcome the barriers of prejudice and social expectations. Perhaps my silent choice, made so long ago, was finally beginning to be heard and understood. The following months brought a slow but steady improvement in my relationship with my parents. They started asking about Benjamin, showing genuine interest in his life and work. There was even a Sunday lunch where my father, to my surprise, complimented the beauty of a violin Benjamin had restored. There were still remnants of their old expectations, and I knew complete acceptance might never happen. But the ice had begun to melt, replaced by gradual understanding and mutual respect. They saw my happiness with Benjamin, and perhaps that, in the end, was what truly mattered. One day, as we walked hand in hand, Benjamin stopped and turned to me, his eyes shining with deep love. "Will you marry me, Monica?" Tears came to my eyes as I nodded, an emotional yes escaping my lips. In that moment, I realized that my choice had led me to true love and authentic happiness. And although the journey to family acceptance still had its challenges, I knew I was no longer alone. I had Benjamin by my side, and we had built a love strong enough to face any obstacle. And perhaps, with time and patience, the love that united us could also unite the worlds that once seemed so distant. My story with Benjamin was proof that the heart, when guided by authenticity and passion, can find unexpected paths and build bridges where once there were only abysses. And that was the story I wanted to live, the story of my silent love that finally found its melody. Thank you for listening to Monica's story. Please share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video to support us and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.